Welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at this book, Unplugged, a red pill guide to male individuation. I think a lot of you guys out there are going to find it pretty relevant, especially if you're trying to navigate relationships today.
Yeah, I mean, this book, it really kind of jumps right into some of the most controversial topics right off the bat, really starting with what it means to be a man.
Right. And I guess that's kind of the core of the book. It starts with that foundation, like the evolutionary basis for masculinity. I mean, how would you sum up that? What's the gist of it?
Well, I think it's really trying to get at, throughout history, men have always been the hunters, the protectors, the provider, and that's shaped us,
Right.
It's not just a cultural thing, it's in our biology.
So we're talking about those classic alpha traits, right? Like aggression, dominance, competition. But, how does all that stuff play out in today's world? I mean, we're not exactly out there wrestling saber-toothed tigers anymore.
Right. Yeah. But the book's argument is that these instincts, they haven't disappeared. They've just been channeled into different areas,
Okay. I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Like, think about, the drive to succeed in business or the competitive spirit you see in sports. Even how some men approach dating.
Yeah.
I mean, it all goes back to these ancient hardwired.
It's interesting, because there's definitely, especially in the red pill community, this feeling that those natural instincts are being demonized.
Yeah.
Like society's telling men to be less aggressive, less dominant, more emotionally sensitive. But maybe those instincts are there for a reason.
Yeah, that's what this book really makes you confront. Like, are we suppressing something that's actually essential for society to work properly?
Yeah. Right.
And is that actually having negative consequences, not just for men, but for everybody?
Yeah. Instead of trying to erase those instincts, maybe it's about understanding them, channeling them in healthier ways.
Exactly. And that actually leads right into another big idea that the book talks about, the patriarchal paradox.
Oh, yeah. The patriarchy. That's a word you hear a lot these days. And usually, not in a good way. But this book has a different take on it, right?
It does. It flips the script a little bit.
How so?
Well, it argues that the patriarchy, it isn't about oppressing women, really. It's more about recognizing the inherent differences between men and women, and how those differences have actually helped societies be stable and successful throughout history.
Okay, I can already see how this is going to ruffle some feathers.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how the book actually backs up this claim. Does it give any specific example?
It does. For example, it points out that throughout history, patriarchal societies have tended to be more economically successful, which, that benefits everybody, not just men.
Right.
And then it also argues that those societies often have lower crime rates, because men are raised with a strong sense of responsibility to protect, to provide.
So it's saying, hey, maybe there's something valuable here that we've kind of lost sight of.
Exactly, yeah. And for guys who are already questioning that traditional feminist narrative, it can be pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, like finally.
Yeah.
Someone's acknowledging the other side of the coin.
Right.
Which brings us to another, I guess, really central concept to the red pill philosophy, the red pill awakening. What does this book have to say about that?
Well, it describes the red pill as a process of kind of seeing the world without the illusions of the blue pill, seeing the hard truths about gender dynamics, relationships, the way society really operates.
And I imagine for a lot of guys that awakening can be pretty jarring, it's like their whole worldview gets flipped upside down.
Can be, and it's tough, especially when you're trying to reconcile it with everything you were taught growing up.
So is this book kind of a guide for navigating that process?
Yeah.
Helping men make sense of what they're seeing?
You could say that, yeah. It's definitely offering this framework for understanding the world through this red pill lens. And one of the big things that comes up, during that whole awakening process is this critique of certain feminist narrative.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. I mean, the book really goes after some of the core ideas of feminism. Does it get into like the wage gap and affirmative action, all that stuff?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It really challenges those narratives that paint men as, inherently privileged, the oppressor. Like, for example, the wage gap. The book argues that it's just not an accurate picture.
Yeah, how so?
Well, it says that, the wage gap ignores things like the career choices people make, or how many hours they work, even their risk tolerance.
Right, because men are more likely to go for those high-risk, high-reward jobs, even if it means working crazy hours or, facing more dangerous conditions.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And then with affirmative action, the book argues that those policies can actually end up harming men. Well, it creates a system where, qualifications become secondary to meeting diversity quotas. It even brings up that glass cliff concept.
Oh, yeah. Remind me what that is.
It's that idea that Men are often promoted to leadership positions when a company is already in trouble, like they're set up to fail.
Right. Wow.
Like they're given this poisoned chalice.
Basically, the book is presenting this alternative perspective on gender dynamics,
Yeah.
challenging those traditional feminist ideas.
Yeah, you could say that. And it's not about pointing fingers or playing the victim.
Right.
It's more about understanding how these narratives really affect men's lives, offering a different point of view.
Okay. And I guess this leads us to another concept that's really big in the red pill world, right? Men going their own way.
MGKOW.
EOW.
So what's the book's take on that?
Well, it's about men basically choosing to opt out of traditional societal expectations. Yeah, especially when it comes to relationships.
It's about recognizing that the rules of the game have changed, you know? Those old models of masculinity, they don't really apply anymore.
So instead of trying to fit into a system that they feel is, stacked against them, these guys are focusing on themselves.
Exactly, yeah. Their own growth, their careers, their passions.
It's about taking control, defining their own path.
Yeah, and for some guys, that means stepping back from traditional relationships entirely.
Got it. So the book also talks about, navigating relationships from this red pill perspective. What are some of the key takeaways there?
Well, a big part of it is understanding female psychology, and the book looks at that through the lens of hypergamy.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but to be honest, I'm not really sure what it means.
Well, basically, hypergamy is the idea that women are naturally drawn to men who have certain desirable qualities, like strength, status, resources.
So it's kind of like it's in their nature.
Yeah, there's a biological and evolutionary basis for it.
So the book is saying men need to, step up their game, become more attractive partners by cultivating those traits that women are drawn to.
It's not just about superficial attraction, It's about becoming the best version of yourself, developing your confidence, your competence, your ability to provide, protect,
Right.
It's about understanding what drives attraction and how to use that to your advantage.
Does the book have any specific advice on this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of practical advice on dating, building attraction, maintaining healthy relationships, all from this red pill perspective.
One thing that really struck me about the book was its emphasis on brotherhood. It seems like that's a big deal in the red pill community. The importance of having strong connections with other men.
Oh, absolutely. The book argues that men really need those genuine, authentic connections with other men, those supportive relationships where they can be themselves, no judgment.
Because let's face it, in today's world, those traditional male spaces are kind of disappearing. Those places where guys used to connect and bond.
Right. We've lost a lot of the rituals and traditions that used to foster that kind of bond. And the book argues that that's created a real void in men's lives.
So what does the book suggest? How do we fill that void?
Well, it emphasizes the importance of seeking out real-world connections,
Okay.
Whether it's through men's groups, sports, hobbies, just hanging out with guys who get it,
Yeah.
It's about making an effort to create those opportunities for brotherhood.
Okay. And what about technology? Social media. Seems like that can be a mixed bag when it comes to brotherhood.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword. On one hand, it helps men find other guys who share their values, build communities online, get support, but it can also be really isolating.
Right.
And it can lead to those toxic echo chambers where all you hear are the same negative ideas over and over again.
So it's about using technology wisely, but not letting it replace those real-life connections, right?
Exactly. And that actually leads to another point the book makes about the modern world, which is this idea of a war on masculinity.
Okay, let's unpack that a little. What exactly does the book mean by a war on masculinity?
Well, it argues that there's this kind of deliberate effort to undermine those traditional masculine values and role. It's happening everywhere. Education, media, even in religious institutions.
So we're talking about messages that portray men as incompetent, out of touch, dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
Those stereotypes that say, masculinity is toxic.
Right. And the book argues that all these negative messages, they have a real impact on men,
Yeah.
Their self-esteem, their sense of purpose, their ability to function in the world. They're being told that who they are is wrong.
And this ties back into that red pill awakening,
Right.
It's about recognizing these messages and then pushing back against them.
Exactly. It's about finding a more authentic, more empowering way to define what it means to be a man.
So the book isn't saying that men should just cling to those old school rigid notions of masculine.
No, not at all. It's about finding a balance,
Right.
embracing the best parts of being a man in today's world, but also recognizing that we need to, adapt and evolve.
It seems like we're talking about a pretty big shift in perspective for a lot of guys. The book uses this phrase, male individuation. What does that even mean?
It's kind of the idea that men need to break free from all those expectations that society tries to impose on them.
Okay.
And really discover who they are as individuals, not just what they're told they should be.
So it's like defining your own values, your own goals, your own path.
Exactly, yeah. And recognizing that there's no one right way to be a man.
Right.
What works for one guy might not work for another. It's about finding what really resonates with you, what aligns with, your own values, and allows you to live a fulfilling life.
It sounds like that idea of individuation, really ties into that whole red pill awakening we were talking about before.
Yeah, definitely.
It's about like taking control of your own masculinity instead of letting society dictate it to you.
Exactly. And the book actually gives you a lot of practical advice on how to do that.
Oh yeah, like what?
It covers everything from, relationships, career, even legal strategies for men who are dealing with issues in family court.
Speaking of legal challenges, the book gets pretty real about the biases men face in things like divorce and custody battles.
Yeah, it does. It argues that the legal system often favors women, especially when it comes to things like child custody and alimony.
What does the book suggest men do? How can they protect themselves if the system is, kind of working against them?
Well, it stresses being proactive, documenting everything, knowing your rights, and finding lawyers who specialize in men's rights issues.
So it's almost like men need to go into these situations knowing that, they might be at a disadvantage.
It's not about being paranoid, but it's about being prepared, understanding the risks.
Right. Knowledge is power, especially when the odds might be stacked against you. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, this whole idea of a war on masculinity.
Yeah.
The book claims that there's this deliberate effort to undermine traditional male values. But is it really a war? Or is that maybe a little over the top?
It's definitely a strong term, but the book argues that it accurately reflects what men are up against in today's world. It's about recognizing that there are actual forces out there trying to redefine masculinity in ways that could be harmful to men.
So it's not just about like political correctness or, changing social norms. It's something more intentional, more systematic.
Right. It's about understanding the ideologies, the agendas, behind these changes and how they affect men.
Okay, so if there is a war on masculinity, what does the book say men should do about it?
It basically calls for men to, stand up and reclaim their masculinity, project those negative messages, and fight for their value. It's about being aware of the challenges, educating yourself, and taking action to create a more just, equitable society for men.
So it's not about like retreating or giving up. It's about like getting involved and pushing back against those harmful ideas.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that men have an important role to play in society, and that their voices deserve to be heard.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. And I think a lot of guys listening, especially those who are, already familiar with the red pill philosophy, are going to find a lot to think about in this book.
I think so too. It definitely challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom and offers, a really unique perspective on what masculinity means today.
Absolutely. Well, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we definitely recommend checking out Unplugged, a red pill guide to male, and you can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's a challenging read, but there's a lot of valuable insight and advice in there, stuff that can help guys navigate the complexities of the world today.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep striving to be the best versions of yourself.